I too would like to acknowledge country. I think one of the example I'm going to use for a partnership today is an invasive species, myrtle rust, and I think it's just worth reflecting upon the impact that these sorts of invasive species have on country and on the species within them. Has a devastating effect both on the culture and the way in which that country is used. So I think it's particularly important to recognise that. So what I'll do, talk a little bit of partnerships in the second half, but I'll give you a very quick introduction to myrtle rust. It's an invasive plant pathogen, first entered into the country in 2010. It's an exotic rust fungus, Ostropoccinia acidii, pathogenic to Myrtaceae, which obviously in Australia is critically important. It was first reported on guava in Brazil, jumped across to plantations of eucalyptus, and then has just worked its way around the world in wherever Myrtaceae are a particularly prominent part of those ecosystems. So April 2010, it was first reported in the central coast of New South Wales, probably imported from Hawaii. It causes these sorts of deformations of the leaves, infects and attacks the flower and fruit production of a range of different species. And then the picture you see on your right-hand side is the sorts of impact that the disease can have over a period of time on, in this particular case, Rhodamnia rubescens ecosystems up and down the coast of New South Wales and into Queensland. It was first recorded in New South Wales, as I said, very quickly spread perhaps with the help of a few big box hardware companies across Queensland, Victoria and Tasmania, then spread into the Northern Territory, and there's been one report of the disease in Western Australia in the Kimberley. There are multiple strains known internationally. We have one strain present in Australia, and I'll tell you why that's important in a moment. Has been blown across to the Lord Howe Island on a couple or three occasions maybe, Kermadec Islands, and then to New Zealand and to other places. We now have, over a period of 15 years since this pathogen was introduced, we now have 20 species on an extinction trajectory, which is pretty radical in terms of the speed of which has happened, and perhaps another 20 to 30 that are on the slide, as they say. The strains that are spread across the world, the pink one is the pandemic strain that we have, but what's worth noting is the green one in South Africa and perhaps the purple one in Brazil. These are strains that are very aggressive on eucalyptus species. The pandemic strain that we currently have, not so much a problem on eucalyptus species, but quite a problem on a whole range of other Myrtaceae myrtle species. We know there's around about 524 species of Myrtaceae that are able to be infected. About 17% of our species can be affected, but the caveat here is that many are not yet tested. We know we have 43 species that are on a trajectory for extinction, and certainly a number of them have been listed as critically endangered over a very short period of time. Rhodamnia species, a couple of Rhodamnia species now, Rhodomyrtus sidioides, the native guava, and Lenwebia. The conservation consequences are dramatic and drastic. So we know that there are a number of highly susceptible species which extinction is likely without intervention. We have a number of moderately susceptible species which, under the right conditions, will end up being functionally extinct, and then a range of different other factors will happen. All that results in terms of infection, regardless of whether it's low infection through to high infection, as those species are unable to be, they have a competitive disadvantage. And so we've worked as a community of researchers, government agencies and different organisations, both non-government and not-for-profits, working on a range of in situ and ex situ actions that are required in terms of saving these species. And this is perhaps where the partnerships are best exemplified and talked about. A lot of this is around about obviously evaluating and monitoring the impact, what species are actually susceptible, how susceptible they are, where is the impact happening. This has resulted in a range of different activities. Securing Myrtaceae germplasm in conservation collections has been a critical component and continues to be a critical component that's being undertaken by a range of organisations. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Critical component of all of this is that all of the actions that we're undertaking are better informed and better directed and more effective and efficient and cost effective, where we have an opportunity to do the genomics and the genetics, understand the genetic variability in the host species so that we can better target our actions, be more cost effective and more targeted in terms of what we're able to do. This is often a tricky thing to communicate and get people involved with, but while it's complex at the start, the opportunities it provides and the efficiency of the actions that you have really do make a super huge improvement in terms of the response. So we've got a problem that's trans-jurisdictional. All agencies working, both federal government and a range of different state government agencies, so the partnerships that have to work have to be able to transcend all of those different agencies, all those different state borders, so that we're all collaborating, cooperating, and not working in a way where we're competing or replicating what we do. So this is really a tricky problem. We do term it as a wicked problem, one that requires a broad range of expertise with both low-tech and high-tech options. It's essential to have short-term, but more importantly, long-term capabilities and capacity. We're talking about breeding resistance in trees, understanding the response of different ecosystems to these sorts of problems. This is not something that's going to happen in a short-term funding cycle, in a government's funding cycle, or the traditional ways in which we deal with these sorts of problems. It requires thinking that may transcend over 10 or 20 years, and this is sometimes a hard thing, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, hard thing to get across. It's absolutely critical to include a First Nations perspective for this, and we've done a number of programs and worked with a number of groups both in New South Wales and in Queensland to do this, and that gives us better opportunities to do meaningful work on country, but also provide opportunities for different both First Nations groups but also community groups to contribute to this work, to be able to do see that they're doing action, taking action, and getting the results that are appropriate. There's huge opportunities for broad community involvement, whether it's volunteers, citizen science activities, programs that we've had with the Atlas of Living Australia and the like. So there's fantastic opportunities to do that. Complex, requires lots of interactions and different people to work with, but something that really works. A couple of examples are the germplasm conservation. We're fortunate to have the Australian Seed Bank Partnership in Australia with agencies all around the country working to both collect the seed and other germplasm conservation material. It's worth mentioning at this point that a lot of the species that we're talking about are recalcitrant in terms of seed production, so we can't stick them in the freezer as traditional, so we need issues like cryopreservation, we need tissue culture, we need glasshouse collections, we need in-the-ground collections. All of them are hugely expensive and take a lot of time and resources. But the Seed Bank Partnership is working right around the country with funding from state agencies like state programs like Saving Our Species and national programs like the native species programs in order to be able to do this work. Ex situ collections, again, highly informed by the genetic information, genomic information that we have, need to be dispersed for risk mitigation because of the potential of trying to grow these collections is complex. You need to spray them every 3 weeks in order for them to survive either in the glasshouse or in the ground, and you need to rotate your fungicides that you're using. Lots of complexities in terms of the technical requirements, but also in terms of the space, the resources, and the way in which you do this. It is also possible to look at opportunities to do it in regions and in climates where that may not be conducive to myrtle rust. As I mentioned, the genomics and genetic information is critically important to the gardens. We're fortunate enough to have Maurizio and his Research Centre for Ecosystem Resilience team working on these issues, looking at the genetic variability across the population of these species, taking that information and then reducing the number of individuals that we need to grow and contain in the collection so that we're getting the smallest number of individuals that we have while maintaining the highest level of genetic variability within the collection. Really important in terms of the resources required. So some of the pros and cons for partnerships in terms of dealing with a problem like this is the expectations. We've often worked with agencies and organisations who may not necessarily have this long-term view and perspective want answers, want to provide us with 3 years of funding or 12 months of funding in order for us to solve this problem. This is not achievable. We need to communicate really well about how much work is required, how we do it and what we do it. Recognising that not all of the partners are going to be equally resourced, both financially or in terms of expertise, making sure that we use all of the available types of expertise and resources that we have with different dispersed agencies and locations. The mixture of state, federal, non-government, not-for-profit, university funding is really good because it has allowed us to tap into funding, particularly in the early years when there wasn't much interest in the impact of this problem. And it also has allowed us to be able to communicate a bit more freely than people like myself who are in a government agency might be allowed to, but where we can work with our partners in the Australian Network for Plant Conservation and in the Invasive Species Council and the like, to be able to lobby, to talk to governments, to talk to the community, to engender activities and actions so that we can get that. But what is essential is communication, collaboration, ensuring that we're all working together on the problem, making sure that it's as collaborative as possible with the information and the data that we're producing shared across all agencies so that we get the best possible outcome in the long run. Thank you.